You spent years becoming an expert, thousands of hours, countless failures. Finally, you mastered it. And now, that mastery is destroying you. Because the world changed, the rules shifted, and everything you know, every pattern burned into your mind, is now the very thing preventing you from adapting. The samurai understood this paradox. The more you know, the less you see. The more skilled you become, the more rigid you are. True mastery isn't accumulating knowledge. It's learning to empty the cup. In 1704, in the mountains of Kyoto, a master was about to learn the hardest lesson of his life. Not from a teacher, not from a scroll, but from a beginner who knew nothing. And in that encounter, an ancient truth would reveal itself. Sometimes, knowing too much is the greatest obstacle to seeing what's actually there. This is the story of how expertise becomes a prison, and how the only key to freedom is the one thing your ego will fight to prevent: letting go of what you know. Chapter 1. The Undefeated Master. Takeda Shinzo was 52 years old and had never lost. Not once in 28 years. Not in sparring, not in formal duels, not even in street confrontations during his younger years as a wandering ronin. He ran the most respected dojo in Kyoto. Students traveled for months to train under him. His techniques were documented in scrolls studied throughout Japan. Other masters sent their students to learn from him. Takeda's specialty was anticipation. He could read an opponent's intention before they moved. See the strike coming in the shift of weight, the tension in shoulders, the flicker of eyes. He had fought so many duels that he knew every pattern, every setup, every possible attack. His expertise was absolute, his confidence unshakable. One autumn morning, a young man arrived, 19 years old. No introduction letter, no recommendation, just a request to train. "Have you studied the sword before?" Takeda asked. "No, master. I'm a farmer's son, but I want to learn." Takeda nodded. Beginners were common. "You'll start with basic stances, footwork. It will be months before you touch a bokken." "Master," the young man said, voice uncertain, "the other students told me you sometimes test new students with a match to see their spirit." Takeda smiled. This was true. Not a real duel, just a brief exchange to assess courage and natural instinct. "Very well, take a bokken." They faced each other in the training hall. Other students gathered to watch. This was routine. The master would assess the beginner, offer corrections, and training would begin. Takeda assumed his stance. Perfect form, accumulated over decades. He watched the young man fumble with the wooden sword, holding it awkwardly. "Begin when ready." The young man didn't move properly, didn't set his feet right. He just stood there, uncomfortable, uncertain. Then he moved. It wasn't a technique. It wasn't anything Takeda recognized. The young man simply rushed forward, sword swinging in a wild, unpredictable arc. Takeda's mind raced through his catalog of responses. This setup usually meant, but the footwork suggested, except the grip indicated. The confusion lasted half a second. The bokken touched Takeda's throat. Silence in the dojo. The young man stepped back, looking confused himself. "Did I do something wrong?" Takeda stood frozen. In 28 years, no one had touched him in an opening exchange, and a complete beginner just had. "Again," Takeda said, voice tight. They reset. This time, Takeda would be ready. He knew what to expect now. But the young man didn't rush this time. He waited, shifted oddly, then moved at an unexpected angle. Again, Takeda's expertise betrayed him. His body tried to respond to patterns that weren't there. Again, the Bakken found an opening. The students whispered. This was impossible. Takeda's face flushed. Leave. This dojo isn't for you. After the beginner left, Takeda sat alone. His hands shook, not from fear, from confusion that bordered on crisis. How? How had a farmer's son with no training touched him twice? That evening, Takeda did something he hadn't done in decades. He visited another master, an older man named Yoshida, who had retired to a small temple. I need to understand something, Takeda said, explaining what happened. Yoshida listened quietly, then smiled. Come, let me show you something. The old master led him to a small garden where a monk was raking sand around stones. Watch, Yoshida said. The monk worked for several minutes, creating elegant spirals. Then a young novice approached, clumsy, uncertain. He accidentally kicked sand across the pattern. The monk looked at the disruption. Then, instead of fixing it, he incorporated it into a new pattern, one that somehow looked better than the original. Do you see? Yoshida asked. I see a mistake being corrected. No, you see a master who hasn't forgotten how to see what's actually there, rather than what he expects to see. Yoshida poured tea, carefully filled Takeda's cup, then kept pouring. The tea overflowed, spilling across the table. Takeda jerked back. Master, the cup is full. Like your mind, Yoshida said gently. So full of technique, pattern, and expertise that nothing new can enter. That boy defeated you not despite his ignorance, but because of it. He didn't know the proper patterns, so he couldn't be trapped by your expectation of them. So expertise is worthless? No, expertise is essential, but without Shoshin, beginner's mind, expertise becomes a cage. You've spent decades filling your cup. Now you must learn something harder. What? How to empty it? Chapter 2. Shoshin, the beginner's mind. The next morning, Yoshida explained the principle that would change everything. Shoshin, the old master said, writing the characters. Beginner's mind, the mind that approaches everything as if for the first time. Not forgetting what you know, but not being imprisoned by it either. They sat in meditation hall. Morning light filtered through paper screens. When you began training, what did you see when you picked up a sword? Possibility, mystery. I didn't know what it could do, so everything seemed possible. Exactly. Your mind was empty, ready to be filled. Every movement was discovery. You were present with what was actually happening, not comparing it to what you'd seen before. But that's what learning is, building patterns, understanding what works, recognizing situations and knowing how to respond. Yes, and that learning is vital, but the same process that creates expertise also creates blindness. Yoshida stood, took a practice sword. When I show you this stance, what do you see? Takeda looked. Jodan no Kamae, high guard, weight slightly back, prepared for downward strike, vulnerable to low attacks but strong for... Stop. You see labels, categories, past experiences. You see everything except what's actually in front of you. He handed the sword to a young monk. You, hold this above your head. The monk held it clumsily, incorrectly. Now, what do you see? Poor form, weak grip, elbow too wide. You still see comparison, judgment against proper form, but what's actually there, not what it should be, what it is. Takeda looked again, tried to see without labeling. A person holding a wooden sword above their head. Yes, just that. This is Shoshin, seeing what is, not what you expect, or what you know, or what you've seen before. Yoshida dismissed the monk, sat back down. The beginner who defeated you, he moved in ways you couldn't recognize. So your expertise had nothing to work with. Your mind kept searching its library, but the book he was reading from wasn't there. And while you searched, he simply responded to what was in front of him. You. Takeda felt something crack open in his understanding. But how? How do I maintain expertise while not being trapped by it? That is the practice of a lifetime. You must learn to empty the cup. And I warn you, it's harder than filling it ever was. Chapter 3. Emptying What's Full. Yoshida gave Takeda a practice that seemed absurdly simple. For 1 month, train as if you've never held a sword before. Impossible. I can't forget 28 years. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to put aside. Big difference. Every morning, Takeda would approach basic training with deliberate not knowing, not pretending ignorance, but genuinely questioning whether the way he'd always done it was the only way. Ask yourself with every movement, what if this is the first time? Week 1, the frustration. It was torture. Takeda would assume a basic stance and try to feel it fresh, but immediately his expertise would flood in. Corrections, adjustments, comparisons. During sparring, opponents he'd always handled easily were landing strikes, not because they'd improved, but because Takeda kept second-guessing his responses. "This is making me worse," he told Yoshida. Yes, unlearning always looks like decline first. You're dismantling what you built. The question is, can you tolerate feeling like a beginner again? Week 2, the glimpse. Something shifted during morning training. Takeda was practicing basic strikes. He raised the bokken, started the downward cut. For just a moment, he felt the weight as if he'd never felt it before. The grain of the wood, the simple arc of gravity. It lasted 3 seconds before his expertise flooded back. But in those seconds, he saw something he'd never noticed. His habitual form created unnecessary tension in his left shoulder. A tiny inefficiency repeated 10,000 times. He adjusted. The strike felt lighter, faster, not because he added technique, but because he removed unnecessary effort. "There," Yoshida said when Takeda described it. "That's the glimpse. The empty cup filling with what's actually useful, not what you thought should be there." Week 3, the unraveling. The practice became disturbing. Takeda began noticing how much of his teaching was just repetition of what he'd been taught. How many techniques were there because that's how it's done, not because he'd verified their effectiveness. He started experimenting, changing things, trying variations his master would have called improper. Some worked better, some worse. But questioning revealed how much he'd been operating on autopilot. His senior students became concerned. "Master, why are you teaching beginners to question basic forms?" The proper way might just be the way we've always done it, not necessarily the best way. Week 4, the return. The young farmer's son returned. "Master said I should leave, but I have nowhere else to go. Please, let me train." Takeda looked at him differently now. "Tell me, when we faced each other, what were you thinking?" "I was terrified. I didn't know what to do, so I just moved. No technique, no strategy. I don't know any. I just tried not to get hit." Takeda smiled. "You will train here, but I'm going to ask something strange. Don't learn too much, or at least, don't let what you learn blind you to what you see." That afternoon, Takeda sparred with senior students. Something was different. His mind was quieter, less cluttered. He responded to what was actually happening, not what his experience said should happen. He moved like water, not like a master executing perfect technique, like someone discovering the right movement in the moment it was needed. His students felt the difference. This wasn't the Takeda they knew. "Master, you've changed," one said after. "I've emptied the cup, or started to. It's harder than filling it, but what's pouring in now is better than what was there before." Chapter 4. The Science of Expertise. Blindness. That evening, Yoshida explained the deeper mechanisms at work. Your brain is designed to create patterns. It's efficient. Someone throws a punch. You've seen it before. You respond automatically. This is good. This keeps you alive. They sat in meditation hall, evening incense burning. But here's the trap. Every pattern you learn becomes a filter. You stop seeing reality directly. You see reality through your library of patterns. And if reality doesn't match your library, your brain forces it to fit anyway. Yoshida drew in the sand, a simple circle. You see a circle. But what if I told you this is actually a sphere, and you're only seeing one face of it? Your brain immediately categorized it as circle because that pattern is familiar. You stopped seeing what's actually there. This is what happened with the beginner, Takeda said. I tried to fit his movements into patterns I knew, but he wasn't using patterns, so my mind kept searching while he hit me. Exactly. In psychology, knowledge that will come centuries from now. This is called cognitive rigidity. The more expert you become, the more your brain relies on existing schemas, patterns, shortcuts. It's efficient, but inflexible. Yoshida paused. Let that sink in. The Stoics understood this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your expertise was your impediment until you recognized it. Now it becomes your way forward. But how do I maintain useful patterns while not being trapped by them? Through Shoshin. Beginner's mind isn't ignorance. It's holding expertise lightly. Like a sword, gripped too tight, your hand tires and your movement stiffens. Held lightly, it becomes an extension of your body. Yoshida explained more. Modern understanding will call this metacognition, thinking about thinking. The expert is unconsciously competent. The master with Shoshin is consciously competent and consciously questioning. He drew 3 circles in sand. Beginning, unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what you don't know. Intermediate, consciously competent. You know, and you know that you know. Expert, unconsciously competent again. You know, but you forget that you know. It becomes automatic. But true master, consciously competent with beginner's mind. You know that you know, but you hold it lightly enough to see what's actually there rather than what you expect. Takeda absorbed this. So expertise is the second circle. Mastery is the fourth. Yes, and most people stop at 3. They become expert and think that's the end. But the real mastery, the kind that adapts, that sees clearly, that doesn't become rigid, that requires going further, requires emptying the cup even while keeping the cup. Chapter 5. The Master Reborn. 3 months after his defeat, Takeda held a special training session. He invited masters from neighboring dojos, not to teach, to question. I've been a master for 28 years, he told the assembled group. "And recently I discovered I've been blind for most of them. Today I want to conduct an experiment. I want beginners to show us what we no longer see." He brought out 5 complete beginners, farmers, merchants, people with no training, and he asked them a simple question. "If you were trying to defend yourself with this sword, what would you do?" The masters watched, amused at first, as the beginners fumbled with clumsy, incorrect techniques. But Takeda pointed out something none of them had noticed. "Watch. This farmer grips the sword like an axe because that's what he knows. Inefficient by our standards. But look, his power generation is actually superior for someone with his build and strength. We teach proper grip that works well for average build. But for him, his wrong grip might be right." The masters became quiet, watching differently. Another beginner used 2 hands on the sword in a way that violated every formal teaching. But Takeda demonstrated how that wrong grip actually created a triangle of stability perfect for someone with injured shoulders. "What if," Takeda said slowly, "half of what we call proper technique is just tradition? What worked for our teachers, in their bodies, with their opponents? What if we've been teaching the map, not the territory?" One master, older, set in his ways, stood to leave. "This is madness. You're abandoning everything we know." "No," Takeda said. "I'm questioning whether everything we know is everything there is to know. I'm emptying my cup so I can see what I've been missing." Some masters left, others stayed, and those who stayed began the hardest training of their lives, unlearning. Chapter 6. The Year of Not Knowing. Takeda spent the next year practicing radical Shoshin, not just in sword technique, in everything. Every morning he would sit in meditation and deliberately empty his mind of categories. Then he would walk through his dojo as if seeing it for the first time. The worn spot on the floor, was it really from students pivoting during training? Or had he just assumed that? Looking closely, it was actually from the door scraping. The hanging scroll, he'd read it thousands of times. Fall 7 times, stand 8. But this morning, he noticed the calligraphy itself. The way the character for fall seemed to lean, while stand was perfectly vertical. The artist had embedded the meaning in the form itself. How had he never noticed? Everything became new when seen without assumption. His teaching transformed. Instead of saying, "This is how you hold the sword," he started asking, "How does the sword want to be held? What feels balanced to you? What grip lets you move freely?" Students were confused at first. They wanted the right answer, but Takeda was giving them something more valuable, the question. One student complained, "Master, I don't know how it wants to be held. That's why I'm here, to learn." "No," Takeda said. "You're here to discover. I can show you how I hold it, how it's traditionally held, but your hand isn't my hand. Your body isn't traditional body, so the answer for you might be different. And you'll never find it if I just give you mine." This created stronger students, not because they knew more technique, but because they were learning to think, to feel, to discover rather than just copy. Once per week, Takeda would deliberately fail at something, attempt a technique poorly, ask a stupid question, admit not knowing. This was torture for his ego. He was Master Takeda. People came to him for answers, and here he was, acting confused. But something remarkable happened. His students became more willing to ask questions, to admit confusion, to try things without fear of looking stupid. The dojo transformed from a place of rigid hierarchy to a laboratory of discovery. Takeda started training in different weapons, different styles, not to master them, to deliberately be a beginner again. He picked up a spear, knew nothing about it, approached it with empty mind, discovered things the spear masters at other dojos had forgotten because they were so embedded in tradition. He sparred with a karate practitioner, different range, different strategy. His sword expertise was useless, so he had to see fresh, respond to what was actually happening. Each new art emptied his cup a little more, showed him how much he'd been seeing through the filter of his expertise rather than seeing directly. Chapter 7. The Empty Master. 1 year after his defeat, a challenge arrived. A famous swordsman from Edo, Yamaguchi Kenji, was traveling through the region, defeating masters. He'd heard about Takeda's transformation, about this strange new teaching. He wanted to prove that tradition still mattered. The duel was set, public, formal. Takeda's students worried. "Master, you haven't been training normally. You've been experimenting." "Then I'll lose, and I'll learn from that." The night before, Takeda didn't train. He sat in meditation, deliberately emptied his mind of strategy, of technique, of worry. He approached the duel with Shoshin, beginner's mind, wondering what he would discover. The courtyard was packed, students, masters, townspeople, watching to see if Takeda's transformation was wisdom or madness. Yamaguchi arrived with theatrical confidence, powerful, fast, technically flawless, everything Takeda used to be. They bowed, drew wooden swords, assumed positions. Takeda looked at Yamaguchi without category, without pattern recognition, just saw a man holding a sword. Stance meant nothing, reputation meant nothing. Only this moment. Yamaguchi attacked first, powerful downward strike. Textbook perfect. Takeda's body responded, not from technique, not from pattern library, from direct seeing. The strike was powerful, but committed, left an opening in the follow-through, not an opening he'd learned about, an opening that was there, in that specific moment. Takeda's counter wasn't anything he'd planned. It simply emerged from reality. His bokken touched Yamaguchi's ribs. Point. They reset. Yamaguchi attacked again. Different angle, still perfect form, still textbook. And that was his weakness. Takeda could see it now. Yamaguchi was fighting with mastery, but mastery without Shoshin. Every movement was correct for the ideal, not for what was actually happening. Takeda moved like water, no fixed form, no predetermined response. Just flowing. Second touch, third. After 5 points, it was over. The crowd was silent. Yamaguchi was clearly more technically skilled, more powerful, more impressive. But Takeda had won, not through better technique, through no technique, through seeing what was actually there. Yamaguchi stood, breathing hard. "How? Your form was wrong, inconsistent. You violated basic principles." I stopped trying to impose my principles on reality. I let reality show me what was needed. That's not how mastery works. That's not how expertise works. But mastery, real mastery, requires letting go of expertise when it becomes a cage, emptying the cup so it can be filled with what's actually useful now. Yamaguchi bowed deeply. "Teach me." "I can't teach you. I can only show you the question. What if everything you know is getting in the way of seeing what's actually there? Chapter 8: The Eternal Practice. Years later, Takeda was old. His dojo had become legendary, not for producing the most technical students, but for producing the most adaptive ones. A young master visited, eager, skilled, confident. "Master Takeda, I've heard you teach unlearning, but I've spent 10 years learning. Shouldn't I master what I know before questioning it?" Takeda poured tea, filled the young master's cup, then kept pouring. The tea overflowed. The young man jerked back. "Master, the cup is full." "Yes, like your mind. 10 years has filled it completely. Now nothing new can enter. You came to learn more, but you can't. Not until you empty what's already there." "But won't that waste the 10 years?" "No. Those years created the foundation. But foundation isn't the building. You've built the platform. Now you must learn to stand on it lightly enough to see what's around you." Takeda stood, walked to the window. Students were training outside. Mastery has levels. First, you don't know what you don't know. Complete beginner, empty cup from ignorance. Second, you know, and you know you know. This is expertise, full cup, very useful. Most people stop here. Third, you know so well you forget you know. Unconscious competence, automatic. This feels like mastery, but it's a trap. Your cup is crystallized, rigid. Fourth, you know, but you hold it lightly. You can pour out what's not needed, add what is needed. This is Shoshin with expertise. This is actual mastery. The young master absorbed this. "So I should forget what I learned?" "No, remember it. But don't be imprisoned by it. The beginner who defeated me had empty cup from ignorance. I had full cup from expertise. He won because his empty cup could receive what the moment offered. My full cup couldn't." Takeda picked up a practice sword. "Now I have a cup that's both empty and full of technique I can use. Empty of attachment to that technique being the only way. I can be expert when expertise is useful, beginner when beginner's mind is useful. That flexibility, that's real mastery." He handed the sword to the young master. "Hold this." The young man took proper grip, perfect form. "Now hold it wrong." "What?" "Hold it incorrectly. Break the rules you learned." Confused, the young master adjusted his grip. It felt wrong. "Now, from that wrong grip, attack me." The attack was clumsy, weak. Again. But this time, don't try to make the wrong grip work like the right grip. Let the wrong grip show you what it can do that the right grip can't. The young master tried again. Something shifted. The wrong grip was actually better for certain angles. It revealed possibilities his correct form had hidden. "You see? Your expertise showed you one path, very good path. But by thinking it's the only path, you became blind to alternatives. Shoshin doesn't mean forgetting the good path. It means remaining open to discovering that what you call wrong might just be different. And different might be exactly what a new situation requires." 10 years later, Takeda was dying. His senior student sat beside him. "Master, what's your final teaching?" Takeda smiled weakly. "Empty the cup, even this teaching. Especially this teaching. Don't make Shoshin into another rigid doctrine." "I don't understand." "Good. Not understanding is closer to wisdom than false certainty. The moment you think you've mastered emptying the cup, your cup is full again. full of pride in your emptiness. He took a breath. The practice never ends. You'll spend your life learning, then unlearning, then learning again. Every time you think you've arrived, you'll discover another layer to let go. This is the path, not a destination, a direction. Is it worth it? All this questioning? What's the alternative? Becoming so certain, so expert, so full of what you know that you can't see what's actually in front of you. Living in a prison built from your own expertise? The student nodded. The empty cup, always. Yes. But remember, empty doesn't mean ignorant. It means spacious, open, ready. You fill the cup with expertise, then you empty it so you can fill it again with what's actually useful now. The cup flows, like water, never stagnant. Takeda looked at the ceiling. I'm about to discover the ultimate emptiness. Death empties all cups. But even in this, I practice Shoshin. I don't know what comes next, and that not knowing is perfect. That's freedom. He closed his eyes. Teach them to question. Teach them to unlearn. Teach them that the hardest lesson is letting go of being right. The strongest warrior isn't the one who knows the most. It's the one who can empty what he knows when it's no longer useful. His final words: empty cup, always ready, never stuck. This practice continues today, not locked in ancient dojos, available to anyone willing to question what they know. At Clarity and Focus, we practice this warrior discipline. Every week, ancient wisdom meets modern challenge. Every week, the question, what do you know that's preventing you from seeing what's actually there? Subscribe. Not to fill your cup with more knowledge, but to learn how to empty it when that knowledge becomes a cage. Because true mastery isn't knowing more, it's knowing when to let go. The empty cup, the beginner's mind, the freedom to see clearly. This is the path.